I had this little sort of mini study about the question that was raised last week. I think it's a helpful question to understand because it's answered for me something I didn't know. So by being asked the question, and that question was uh, regarding the vision that the prophet Zechariah had recorded in the Old Testament, and that is, are the women mentioned in Zechariah chapter 5 angels? Because I keep saying over and over again that angels are specifically not appearing as women in Scripture. So that's a good question. And so I've got a little mini study here. If you can hang around for it, if you can't, that's fine too. But anyway, here is what I want, and it relates to tonight's study. So that's why I thought it would be helpful to tack this on. We saw in tonight's study that the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle as the woman representing Israel was being followed by Satan. So, and however, in Zechariah's vision, he sees two women with wings that are unlike the wings given here in the book of Revelation. In Zechariah 5:9, it says they had wings like the wings of a stork. So, what difference does that make? Well, the background of this leading up to this event here is this vision that Zechariah has, is that Zechariah is shown a vision that represents God's dissatisfaction with the Jews who returned to the promised land after being exiled to Babylon, as you remember that story. Well, and when they returned, they did rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. But instead of going back to being a farming people like God wanted them to be, they became merchants of business. So this turn to materialism is what displeased God. Now, that relates to us today because you can imagine that God is very displeased with the materialism that has captured particularly the American people. Well, this brings us to the same kind of thing that happened to Zechariah over 2,500 years ago. At first, he sees, here's his vision. He sees a woman being thrust into a basket. And then this basket is covered with a lid made of lead. So now she's stuffed in this basket. Well, the woman, Zechariah interprets this woman as symbolizing Israel's wicked materialism. Then Zechariah sees two other women with wings like a stork. The actual quote is Zechariah 5:9. Then I raised my eyes and saw two women coming forth with wind under their wings. They had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted the basket into the air. So, what's happening here? These two women take the basket representing the wicked materialism of Israel to the place where the temple is going to be rebuilt. They fly off with it. Since that time, over the centuries, the Jewish culture has been associated more with being merchants and businessmen rather than an agrarian culture until recently. Now that Israel's been reestablished as a nation in 1948, the Jewish population in Israel has returned to what God intended for them to be, people of agriculture in the nation of Israel. Today, Israel is the third largest exporter of fruit in the world. They're even turning the desert into fields of produce. So the question that we want to answer here is, are the women mentioned in Zechariah chapter 5 angels? Well, we have to look at their wings. The wings in the Revelation are wings of the great eagle and represent godly strength and speed. Those are God's wings. The wings in Zechariah's vision are wings like the wings of a stork. So what do storks look like? I actually had to look that up because I wasn't sure. Here's what a typical stork looks like. And every image I saw of a stork had black wings. Parts of their feathers were black. So in order for Zechariah to say they are stork's wings, they must have had the black feathers that storks have. Now, the things that interesting here is in Scripture, storks are symbolic and associated with wickedness and evil. So these women are interpreted as being representative of the demonic beings of the satanic world, carrying with them the basket which represents the wickedness and materialism that displeased God in Zechariah's vision. So we have a Bible scholar and commentator, Matthew Henry, who has written this. He says, God has not only winged messengers in heaven, but he can, when he pleases, give wings to those also whom he employs in the lower world. So this leads me to conclude that these women with wings like storks are not angels of God, and it shows that God can even call forces of wickedness to do his bidding whenever he so chooses. So that's my answer. You may agree with it or not, but those are things that I uncovered in my research. And so I'm convinced that, that because they're stork's wings, they have black in them and that they represent the evil and the wickedness that was represented to Zechariah. This is a really great example of how artists can influence our thinking, because when I searched for images of these women with wings in Zechariah's vision, they were all
Yeah.
showed as completely white wing, which would lead you to believe they're angels from God. The artists then did not depict stork's wings. Maybe they didn't know what storks looked like and thought that because they're given wings, they are all the same. So until you know the significance of storks in scripture and specifically stork's wings, it's easy for us to be misled. And so in order to get these wings to look like stork's wings, I had to actually go in computer generate my own stork wings because other artists had these all white wings.